Hey everyone, Eric Chabot here, and I direct a couple apologetic ministries, one at the Ohio State University and another one at Columbus State Community College. We have been on the campus for several years engaging students about the God question, and I also blog at thinkapologetics.com. You're obviously welcome to go there. You probably already have been there if you're watching this. So anyway, I thought I'd take some time today to talk about what I consider the top 5 apologetic topics that everyone should know about. Because sometimes people come to me and they say, well, where do I begin? How do I start learning about the big apologetic topics of our day? And, I can't learn everything. I'm not going to be Ravi Zacharias or Dr. William Lane Craig or Michael Brown or somebody, but I just want to know some of the basics. So, from my experience of doing campus apologetics and campus outreach for several years and just being in the culture, these are my top 5 picks for like where you should begin, some of the topics you should be able to dive into and learning about apologetics. And remember, apologetics is giving reasons for what you believe and why you believe, giving justification for your positions. You do that when you pick a politician, you do that on certain stances in our culture, moral issues, you do that when you pick a school or pick a career. When someone says to you, why did you pick that career? What made you choose that career? Why did you pick that city to live in? And you give reasons or justification for why you picked that or why you made that decision. So we do that with everything, but we're called to do that with our faith as well. We're called to do that for why we think God exists, the God of the Bible, and why we think Jesus is his son or the Messiah has come into this world and died and risen from the dead. So these are some of my top 5 picks, and some of the suggestions I'm going to give you, or books to read on these topics. So first of all, number 1, I definitely think that you should know how to explain the existence of God or why you think God exists without using the Bible. Now you may say to yourself, well, how in the world would I do that? I mean, every Sunday I go to church and I hear sermon after sermon, and we all believe the Bible's the Word of God. It's an authority and it's inspired. Well, guess what? There's a lot of people that don't start with what you believe. And secondly, there's a lot of other religions out there and people in different religions that think their text is authoritative and their text is inspired, such as the Quran or the Book of Mormon. And so you need to be able to talk to people about God's existence without using the Bible. Now, I would say if you're just getting started on introductory level, James Warner Wallace's book, God's Crime Scene, is an excellent book. He does like an inferential reasoning process in this book, but this is an excellent resource on talking about God's existence without using the Bible. He doesn't use the Bible at all in this book, and so that's an excellent resource right there. Also, on a very introductory level, if you want to start with I Don't Have Faith to Be an Atheist by Dr. Frank Turek and Norm Geisler, this has been out for a long time. Obviously, you can see a lot of Dr. Turek's videos online. I've had him to Ohio State several times, but this is a good introductory on just thinking about the existence of God, and everything's laid out systematically in this book. So this is a good introduction if you want to get started there. I also think that any of Paul Copan's books, That's Your Interpretation, God Goes to Starbucks, any of Paul Copan's books are good starting points to think about the existence of God. And if you're going to get really advanced, I mean, if you say, well, that's too basic for me, I really want to go deeper, then try Blackwell's Companion to Natural Theology. Now, that is a very academic read. But the point is that if you find yourself wanting to expand and go deeper and go really academic, then this would be a good resource. It's going to be hard, though, if you don't have some training in philosophy and logic. But anyway, so you always can go deeper. I'm just starting with some very introductory, popular level books. Second thing you need to be able to talk about in today's culture is a worldview. And I always say to students that even when you're younger, that you should at least be able to go off to college with some kind of worldview training. That means a worldview is how you view reality. You need to be able to explain the big questions like origins, destiny, morality, and purpose. I always say that James Sire's book, The Universe Next Door, the fifth edition is an excellent resource. He talks about a lot of different worldviews that are out there today, because obviously there are multiple worldviews competing with our worldview. Another book is R.C. Sproul's The Consequences of Ideas, an excellent resource talking about where we came through philosophy and why people think the way they do today. You should have an overview of that, just some basics about philosophy and basics of worldview. You should be working on your worldview. How does your worldview answer modern day questions and what's going on in the world? So, second thing would definitely be knowing how to articulate your worldview. Third thing I would say that you need to be able to deal with is the issue of the historicity of Jesus. How do we know that that Jesus is who he is using the New Testament? Is the New Testament reliable? Can I trust the documents? Gary Habermas's book, The Historical Jesus here, Ancient Evidence for the Life of Christ, is a good starting point. And I would say that any of Lee Strobel's books, like The Case for the Real Jesus and The Case for Christ, those books are excellent starting points. You know, some people complain that Strobel's books are biased because he only interviews biblical Christian scholars, scholars that are biased or evangelical. But if you read his books carefully, he does give the other side many times. He challenges the people he's interviewing to answer modern day objections. And so it's not just giving one side of the argument. He does present a lot of the other objections out there. And I can tell you a lot of the objections I've heard on college campuses are in those books. They're very common. They're still out there today. So any of his books are good starting points. And then the third thing you definitely need to be able to deal with is the fourth thing is the resurrection of Jesus. Third thing, you definitely need to be able to articulate why you think Jesus rose from the dead, why you think there's good evidence he rose from the dead, why it's important to us in our faith. And of course, this is the central claim of our faith. If Jesus rose from the dead, the God of the Bible is the one true God. It means that God spoke in history somewhere. Jesus is different from Muhammad and any other religious leader. You need to be able to talk about why you think Jesus rose from the dead, why that's so important. So this is a good starting point. Mike Laconis and Gary Habermas's book, The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus. Excellent starting point right there. Now, the fourth thing I would say you need to definitely deal with is religious pluralism. And that's dealing with the different world religions, different beliefs there. Obviously, many people are committed to other faiths. They have their own apologists and they have their own reasons for believing, but I would recommend knowing the different world religions, what they believe, know why yours is different, why, what's the difference between all these different faiths and the different cults out there, learn about Mormonism, learn about some of the other ones. But this is a good starting point. So what's the difference? Very basic book, but definitely need to be a deal with the issue of religious pluralism, why Jesus is the only way to God, or why you think Jesus is the only way to God, the exclusive claims of Jesus. So that would be the fourth thing I think you need to know about when studying apologetics, at least the fourth starting point. And then finally, I would say know something about moral relativism. Know the moral argument, because the moral argument is something that you're going to be using a lot when talking to people. And there's a lot of people that are moral relativists. They think morality is subjective. They think each person has their own morality. Greg Kokel's book and Francis Beckworth, the authors of this book, Relativism, Feet Firmly Planted in Midair. This is an older book, but it's got a lot of basic information there dealing with relativism. So that will help you a lot. Now, like I said, many people may have other things that they think that you should be working on right now or working when you're starting apologetics, but I would say those are good starting points. I'll give you plenty to learn. If you can deal with those issues, God's existence, worldview, of course truth as well, who Jesus is, the historicity of Jesus and his resurrection, and religious pluralism and moral relativism, I think those are good starting points. And so I hope you'll get started. A lot of people watch YouTube clips. They think that's the way to learn. I'm not against YouTube clips, but I highly recommend reading books. I think YouTube clips are a little too simplistic sometimes. They try to cover a very complex topic in 15-20 minutes. It just can't be done. So dive into the books and study hard, and it will pay off in your conversations with others. Have a good day.